Two airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
It was bad, unbelievably bad, but it got worse. And the next time President Bush spoke, he did not need to refer to an apparent terrorist attack.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended. I want to reassure the American people that the full resources of the federal government are working to assist local authorities to save lives and to help the victims of these attacks. Make no mistake, the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible for these cowardly acts.
President Bush, in New York, they daren't start to think about how many people may be dead. Put it this way, there have been 4 passenger airliner crashes, 2 in New York, 1 in Washington, and 1 in Pittsburgh. The number of dead in those plane crashes will doubtless be exceeded by the number of casualties at the World Trade Center. Who did it and why? Michael Clark, head of the Department of Defense Studies at King's College London, on the motive.
Whether the motive is simply revenge or to hurt America, or whether the motive is to generate an astonishing American reaction and some form of American retaliation. And this is not just a terrorist attack, this is the beginning of a crisis.
A senior American senator called this the second Pearl Harbor. Another voice amid the pandemonium said, "This will change everything."
America under attack. That was my colleague Alex Brody. Indeed, the United States is said to be on a war footing. Some news just in. A flotilla of United States warships and 2 aircraft carriers from the Navy base at Norfolk, Virginia, are now taking up stations along the east coast of the United States, just off New York. The BBC's State Department correspondent says this is partly a defensive move after the attacks against New York and Washington, but the ships could also be asked to provide medical facilities and other logistical support. I'm Lise Doucette. You're listening to a BBC World Service News special. Well, let's get another reaction from the Middle East on this devastating day in the United States. It's caused shock around the world, including in Israel, which is all too accustomed to dealing with suicide attacks. The former Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was on the line. First of all, Benjamin Netanyahu, you've lived in the United States. Just how surprised were you by the audacity of this attack?
I wrote in 1995 that there was a lack of appreciation of the strains of militant Islam, which see its ultimate destiny as leading to a final confrontation with the great Satan of the United States.
But of course, it hasn't been proven yet that militant Islam is behind this one.
No, it's not been proven yet, but it is proven that there is a network, close association of such terrorist states like Iran, Iraq, the Afghan Taliban, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Fatah, Arafat's own forces have had close association with bin Laden. So these terrorists that operate in the world today do not operate in a vacuum. They're not suspended in midair. They have territory of sovereign states and regimes which sustain them and give them haven, and give them a place to hatch their plans and carry out their grisly deeds and come back to, for those that do come back. What is important to understand is that whatever capabilities terrorists have today, and we witness it in Israel, and today we saw horrific things in New York, and I think if any people identifies with the people of America today, it's the people of Israel.
Well, as you know yourself that if people want to blow themselves up, it's very, very difficult to stop them. You've written a book on counterterrorism. What specific measures would you suggest that they take now?
Well, the most important thing, 2 points. One, the capabilities that we see today, as horrific as they are not the capabilities of tomorrow. When terrorist states and the organizations that they use will develop nuclear weapons, the toll would be not in the thousands or tens of thousands, but in the millions. This is a danger to our very civilization, our very survival. In London, in New York, in every capital, in every country that is now listening to me, there is a mortal threat. We can wait or we can wake up. Now, the way to handle this is not to go after the individual suicide bomber. When the United States was facing kamikaze pilots, precisely this kind of threat in World War II, threatening its ships and carriers, it didn't simply go out after the individual kamikaze. It went after the aircraft carriers And once they sunk the aircraft carriers in the Battle of Midway, the war was decided. No more kamikazes.
Well, no, of course,
The aircraft carriers in this case is this network of regimes, terrorist states, and terrorist organizations. They have to be dismantled as soon as possible for the sake of our common civilization, which they abhor, but which we must protect.
well, a number of people have commented that they felt the United States wasn't taking this threat sufficiently seriously. Do you now believe that they will have no choice now?
Yes, I do. I think this is a different world. I think this is a turning point of history. This is precisely as was said, the Pearl Harbor of our time. I cannot conceive that after thousands of innocent dead in the heart of the free world, where the terrorists have struck, that the greatest democracy and its allies will not act. What is required now is a unified front of the democracies against the united forces of terror. I think that we have the power today. We may not have it tomorrow. They cannot match our power today, but they will tomorrow. And then history could change even worse, and for the worse. We have the time to act. We must show that we have the will.
Benjamin Netanyahu, former Israeli Prime Minister, thank you for joining us on the BBC. Well, he's not the only person around the world calling for a greater coordination among all countries to fight these networks of terrorism. Of course, we still don't know who is behind today's attack, but already there's discussion at NATO headquarters of a more coordinated response in the fight against terror. Let's now go to some of our correspondents around the world to get some reaction. We're joined from Frank Gardner, who's in Cairo, the Egyptian capital, from Sarah Nelson in Moscow. Barbara Plett is in Jerusalem, and Yola Abdafid is in Brussels. Yola, first of all, to you in Brussels, what are we expecting to hear from NATO?
NATO will make an announcement shortly on today's reaction and on what's happened. But more important,